one language, many varieties. What does this mean? It means we have one language, in this case being English language, made manifest in different forms, in different geographical location, or in different situational um, location or background. So when we examine this one language as manifesting itself in those different situations, be it a different geographical area or a different domain or different field, we seek to understand why this difference. Why this difference? One language showing these differences. You know, for instance, you have an English which is used in a lecture hall, an English which is used for the ease of understanding, English used in a courtroom, and an English used perhaps in a doctor's consultation room. These Englishes, if I may use the word Englishes, these Englishes may not be exactly the same, but you have one English manifesting itself in different ways. So thus you have the topic, one language, many varieties. But then how does it help us to write essays? How does it help us to write projects that are fit for purpose, for academic purpose? How does it help us? One language, many varieties. How does it fit in? You know, how does it fit in having to learn these different manifestations of this one language? How does it help me to write an essay? An essay that has all the features of academic writing. We'll get to that point as we move along in this workshop. Then you have world Englishes. And there are people who would argue there isn't world Englishes, but one world English, which should dominate if we veer or we divert from that English. Then the new so-called English, which is restructured, may not be regarded as an English language. It should be given a different language. But there would be a school of thought or as well that says, no, the restructuring is as a result of the influences of indigenous languages in which this English language is used. Therefore, we cannot divorce that reality from the English that is used in a different geographical environment or setting from that which is used in written, for argument's sake. So they would say that world Englishes, as understood by some scholars, it's a valid term to be used and accepted and not argue for just one dominant English as the standard English or language which should be used across the world. So, and this one dominant standard to be used across the world, then disregard the other variants which are used in different geographical locations as a result of influences within those geographical setups. So one language, many varieties, world Englishes. Let's look further into this, but I'm presenting this from the academic literacy perspective to try and get you to apply the content in this section of your module, apply it in academic texts. What do you mean by academic text? You are going to be producing, of course, assignments that are going to be formally assessed, and these assignments, perhaps, may require an extended response. And when you write an extended response, you need to organize your ideas in a way that would be quite suitable for university writing. But we're looking at it from one language, many varieties perspective, as I have said, so that we are able to say this is a variety which perhaps at UNISA or university would be most acceptable for students to write their assignments on. Right, the learning objectives, I'll just take you through those to explain the differences between standard and non-standard varieties. So we have standard English and non-standard English. All right. So it's important that we are able to identify these differences. When you write your essay or your paragraphs, are you doing it from a position of strength, knowing that you are deliberately making choices which will translate into a written text that subscribes to the standard variety accepted at universities? You understand what I'm saying? Are you making deliberate language choices which will lead to your writing being writing which is suitable for studies at university? So we learn at the differences here between standard and non-standard in order to deliberately, from a position of strength, make those choices when we write. Make those choices which will lead to our texts being texts which use a required standard, which will lead to students' performance in the modules improving. Right. And objective number 2, distinguish between the different varieties of English that occur in different parts of the world and in South Africa. Of course, there are different varieties. There is the American Standard English, there is British Standard, there is South African Standard, there is Nigerian Standard. But can we distinguish the differences? Are you able, when you're reading a text or when you are listening to a speaker, to detect from the word choices that they make, or word choice rather that they make, that this speaker is likely to be a speaker from this geographical location based on their language choice, based on their pronunciation? Can we make a similar distinction with regard to written text? With regard to written text, not only spoken text, but written text. Can we make similar distinction of locating a text geographically based on the writers or text producers' choices that they make in producing that text? So distinguish between the different varieties of English that occur in different parts of the world and in South Africa. South Africa alone, there are varieties. Of course, you would find a variety that is used in Western Cape, different from a variety used in Gauteng or in other provinces of South Africa. And so when we detect these varieties, what makes them distinct or different? Can we identify those aspects or elements that distinguish them? If we are able to do that, then we make choices as we write which variety perhaps would be more, or which variety perhaps we should use in assignments, and which variety we should not. Right. Identify, third objective, identify the phonological, morphological, lexical, and syntactical differences in standard and non-standard varieties. What does that mean? Phonological speaks to the sound of the language, or refers to the sound of the language, pronunciation of the language. Can we identify those differences which establish one standard as, rather, which establish one variety as standard and the other as non-standard? Can we perhaps, from just listening to the language that is spoken, come to that conclusion that this variety is standard and the other variety that we are hearing is non-standard? Can we come to that conclusion based on phonological differences that we detect? What about morphological variations, the word formation variations that we are also looking into as we do language analysis? What about lexical differences, the vocabulary that is used in these varieties, which actually sets them apart? Syntactical differences, in other words, the sentence structure differences. One variety will structure a meaningful sentence in one way, whilst the other variety would actually structure it differently. Can that help us know perhaps which variety has been used or has been used here? So you see, there are these distinguishing factors which we need to examine in order to see the differences between these varieties. We see these differences as it occurs at a phonological, as you can see there, as it occurs at a word formation or morphological, as it occurs at lexical or vocabulary and syntactical or sentence structure level. All right. We'll make examples, of course, or give examples as we actually get into this particular objective later in the presentation. But the other point which perhaps we should aim for is differentiating the registers according to functional domain. I've started this workshop by highlighting geographical locations and domains of language practice, which sets these varieties apart. Which register do we use in a courtroom compared to a classroom register? What register do you use in your assignment? All right, in your written work that you should submit, be it an essay or paragraph or project that you're working on, what register and why would you choose that? What makes it more, which variety, in fact, if I may put it that way, would you actually use in your written text for submission? And when you get feedback on that variety that you have actually used, what does the feedback say? You know, Let me give you this example. Still working with you on this slide, the learning objectives. Let me give you this example. A student writes an essay, and in their essay, their word choice is very conversational. It's like they write as if they are in a conversation with a friend. So the tone is conversational. So they're producing a spoken text in a written form for submission. And the marker identifies challenges and highlights those errors or those gaps. And the student doesn't realize anything wrong with their work because in their thinking, it's fine writing or expressing my understanding and thoughts on this particular topic in the manner that I have done. So they have actually used a spoken variety of English in their assignment. And the results perhaps are disappointingly low, below what they had set as an expectation for themselves, but they are still struggling to find the exact problem with the work that they have submitted. Okay, so let's get to that point where we are able to say, what is it that I need to put in my writing at university undergraduate level, which would then be a variety which fits in with academic writing. Okay, academic writing meaning writing at university. It's just me doing the groundwork with the learning objectives. I'll sum them so that we really stick to this and are guided by them. I'm hoping with this outline, I am touching base with the content in your units. Right. Also, by the end of this workshop, we should be able to analyze language varieties according to social relationships, such as gender, culture, professionalism, and age. Social relationships. There are varieties which are influenced by these social relationships. In other words, young people's choice of words in spoken language may not be the same or similar choice made by adults who are engaging in a conversation, perhaps on the same topic. They are talking soccer. You have men in their 40s or 50s talking soccer, and you have young people in their teens or early 20s talking soccer. But listen to their word choice. It would be different. And thus, language varieties is also influenced by these social relationships, gender, culture, the way perhaps women whose words may not necessarily be exactly the same way that men would. We see that difference as well as we go, as we move along in the presentation. culture, professionalism, and age. Explain the differences between slang, jargon, and register. What is the difference there? We want you to be able to use jargon, which is derived from the module. If you are a law student, you want to use terminology that is predominantly from those modules. If you are in education students, you want to use words that are predominantly from that module in your assignments. Okay. Identify the features that distinguish spoken from the written variety of English. Identify features that distinguish spoken from written variety of English. You see, there are features that distinguish the difference between those two. Spoken and written varieties may not be exactly the same. There are features that distinguish those. Now, this is where a problem may be experienced, where students write as they speak and submit that as work which should be assessed, and when the results come, they see that the marks are not exactly what they would have expected, but it's because they write as they speak. We want to move away from that. And so as we do this, we approach this from the lens of academic writing, not necessarily purely understanding the content on these language varieties, but we understand these varieties from the point of view of what will work for me in the actual practice. What variety would work for me in the actual practice of academic writing, and what will not work for me. And so you make an informed decision there. And also, why this will not work, why this variety will not work, right? And as we look through this, through these lenses that I am actually, through this lens that I am actually unpacking, we should now, as we write, avoid falling into those gaps where we do not quite realize why am I marked down when I was expecting a different outcome. Right. I'm moving to the next slide. It's workshop synopsis. So, how language manifests itself in a variety of social contexts is what we are actually focusing on here, students. How language manifests itself in a variety of social contexts. We will also cover social dialects, regional or social registers, standard varieties, and other varieties. We seek to get into one language and many varieties. This English, why is it showing itself out in different ways, in different situations, in different geographical locations? Why? Why the English of your courtroom is different from the English of a lecture room? And why is it that the American variety is different from the British, South African, Indian varieties, Nigerian varieties? Why? looking into South Africa, the varieties that are here in our country, South Africa, how are they different from each other? Do we have any, or do we have those the varieties at all? Yes, we have standard South African English, but we also have non-standard South African English. The temptation, of course, is always there to fall into non-standard variety when writing your assignments, non-standard variety when writing your assignments. Okay, because we come from different regions. We come from different locations, and the indigenous languages that we use influence the English we speak. Thus, we have a variety in the area of location, which tends to then move into our writing. You know, sometimes you find as you read the student's assignment, you find that the student or essay, you find that they do what you call direct translation. We think in home language, perhaps, which may be different from English. South African context, I think in my home language, mother tongue, and I write in English. And so you find that oftentimes that then interferes with the standard that I am trying to get to, acceptable at the level of university, hampering my performance. So we want to perhaps clear that space and work from positions that would help us to be set for success. Right, I've moved to another slide. Language varieties, colonial legacy. Let's look at colonial legacy. Now, why do we have these Englishes? Let me use the word Englishes. It is because of colonialism, isn't it, that today I am presenting this workshop in the English medium. And I'm doing so because we in South Africa and other Southern African countries were colonized by the English. All right. And therefore, the legacy of colonialism has remained with us in the form of the culture of language that we use in teaching and learning. But here is the point. This language of English will then be absorbing elements of indigenous languages, and that then produces a variety which is very different from the variety used by the colonizer. You see? And so when you submit your assignment, those indigenous elements which have filtered through into the British standard may hamper the performance of the student, because they do get through and interfere, right? So we now have, of course, South African English, we have Indian English, also we have perhaps even Nigerian English, as I've mentioned, and thus we talk of Englishes rather than just English. We talk of Englishes because pronunciation as well is not the same. At sentence level or sentence structure level, English in different countries may not be the same, or in different regions within the same country may not be the same. At word choice level, it may not be the same, right? So we have there a manifestation of varieties within the same country and across different countries. But then we need to have perhaps a standard which guides moderation or assessments of work so that not one student becomes um, advantaged or disadvantaged, whilst we struggle and grapple with the different varieties which perhaps the moderator or the assessor would not perhaps be sure which variety would then be applicable standard at the level of university. And when you struggle with that, you are going to be then considering all the different varieties. And what do you have? You have no regulation. But if you have a standard variety accepted as formal legal variety, then you use that standard to moderate the other varieties that perhaps could come through. Right now, I want us to do this activity. This activity is perhaps in one of your modules, I think is 2601, ENG 2601. It's not from ENG 1502, but ENG 1502 students will also benefit. Now, you submit your essay, your assignments, you've organized your ideas quite well, and you are submitting. Now, in your submission, you use this words, this vocabulary. And the spelling, as you can see, is American spelling, not British spelling. And with South African standard, we use the British standard English. And that is the one that guides us. Thus, these words that you see on your screen are words which should be used, yes, if the assessment requires that we use similar words, but the spelling will be different. And at times the computer, your computer or laptop may autocorrect the spelling, and at other times, depending on how it is said, it may not. But I want us to write these words by inserting in the chat box or typing in the chat box the South African or British equivalent for these American words that you see on your screen, so that you also realize that words differ. Vocabulary may be spelled differently depending on the regional rather geographical location. But then the South African standard requires that we spell these words in a certain way. Of course, we use the British standard. South African standard, British standard is what we are actually using at our universities. Right. So you will see that these spellings here are not exactly the same spellings that you would actually use in South African standard English. So I want you to spell them using the South African equivalent. or British English equivalent, so that we see the differences.
Well, this one with spelling, because I see many, what we must bear in mind that not all words are spelled differently. Like for instance, the word spelling. The spelling is still it has the same meaning, and it's still spelled the same way as the variation. Uh, the American variation and the British variation for spelling is the same.
Correct. You're quite right. It is the same. It's exactly the same. It is not all words, of course. Um, you are quite correct. Now, why? This is just the initial phase. Why do this? You know, we trying to guide the students into perhaps the vocabulary, building to sentence construction, and paragraph writing, so that when we do that, we do it um, in such a way that we do not slip back into varieties which are not appropriate in academic writing. Okay, so from word to sentence to paragraph levels, we want to guard those transitions in such a way that we do not slip back into um, varieties which may not actually be appropriate for academic writing. Right? So as you study, or as you work through your modules, ENG 1502, ENG 2601, if I have it right, you ask yourself, how is this unit preparing me as well to write effectively in the standard South African or British English? How is it preparing me to do that? You see, of course, you'll be assessed differently when the examiner asks for, rather ask or frame their questions. They will do so, expecting that you would give the South African spelling or a South African English spelling of the word favorite. You see, you need to give the correct version. But from the point of view of academic writing, we want you to be producing the expected spelling, the expected sentence structures, the expected organization of paragraphs in such a way that when you are now done and are ready to submit, you are able to check and say the variety that I have used, it is indeed standard, and it has actually, through my interactions with the tutors, I have been able to utilize my experiences there to help in academic writing, to help in application of this knowledge for academic writing purposes, so that there's no gap between the modules and your actual writing at university. If you get the point that I'm making here. So there's no gap. So these workshops are intended to draw on your modules, the content in your module, showing you how that content then translates into you writing assignments in an academically acceptable manner. Because if we go with assignment writing divorced from what you're actually doing in your modules, then you have parallel learning which does not intersect. So the workshops are intended to bring about that intersection to the point where we unlock the application. I hope you understand the point I am making. It is to apply this knowledge in the actual writing of essays, in the actual writing of assignments, be it paragraphs, etc., in a manner that would be academically sound in terms of your language structure choice, your application of conventions, um, uh, empowered by the knowledge accessed in these modules that you have registered for. That's how we are approaching it. That's how we are taking it. And I'm hoping as I'm presenting, it will also assist, strengthen your understanding of the actual content in your own modules. It will actually strengthen your actual content. I'm just going to give you an example. When we talk phonological study or the phonology of the English language, 1502 students would really benefit greatly from that. It's the sound of the English language. When we talk of semantics and pragmatism, the 2601 students as well as the 1501 students will benefit greatly from there. When we talk discourse analysis, we all benefit, but then we then move it to another level. A level that says, how does all of that assist you in sentence construction or assignment or essay or academic writing purposes? At some stage in these workshops, we should present academic writing, strictly academic writing, so that we see the different features or realize the different features of academic writing itself, so that you are able to know I am writing and including in my writing academic, or rather the features of academic writing, which will help my work achieve a better mark or grade. So back to the slides. Thank you for the responses. I saw your words. They are all looking good. They are correctly spelled using the South African or British variety, which you use at university. Getting back to the presentation, I want us to now look into the differences between standard and non-standard English varieties, right? The standard and non-standard English varieties. If we say this variety that you are using, in other words, this type of language of English which you are using is standard, what do we mean? We say it's non-standard. Don't include this in your assignments. What do we mean? Okay, right. Standard English, non-standard English. It is standard, very formal. It uses formal language. It uses correct grammar. It uses full sentences. Is this not what you are expected to do when you write paragraphs for submission? 1502 students, when you do discourse analysis, you will be expected to produce an extended response. In other words, an analysis that is written in a long paragraph or even two for 20 marks, I suppose. You might also be having a similar approach with regard to UNG 2601. students, where you have to write a paragraph. Now, are you using full sentences or fragmented sentences? Are you using correct grammar? Because if you are using correct grammar, formal language, you're using full sentences, you are indeed using the standard English. In our case, the South African Standard English, or South African or the British Standard English. For example, we would say, "Good morning, how are you? I am pleased to meet you." But non-standard, which should not find its way into your assignments, it's, "Hey, how's it? All right." You hear that? It's very informal. It is a variety which is there. We know it is there, but at university assignment apps location, it is misplaced. If you understand what I mean, it is misplaced, not unless the examiner is testing just that aspect to see if you are able to see the differences. But if we see this language making its way into your written texts or responses, then you are actually using non-standard variety of English in your written text, right? Not that it is a restructured kind of version of English which uses totally different words, or it is still acceptable to, in certain settings, to say, "Hey, how's it? Cool." In certain settings, to use this non-standard English variety. But in other settings, for instance, you use the standard which is accepted as formal, as official, documented as official, and using correct grammar, correct structures, sentence structures, and ensuring that the language stays formal. The language stays formal, right? So that is an example of formal expression you have there in the first column. "Good morning, how are you? I am pleased to meet you." That is formal, is acceptable. So it is the feature of standard English. And we want to be leaning more towards that, not unless the examiner tests our understanding of the differences between standard and non-standard Englishes. So you use standard grammar. These are the features. You use correct spelling. Remember spelling. We were working with spelling just now to say we're using the the South African English to spell words, or British Standard to spell words. And so it's important to know the differences then between the two varieties, the American and the British varieties, English varieties, in terms of spelling of words, so that we are able to choose the correct spelling in our assignments. Sentence structures as well, very, very important. How to construct sentences that are standard English based, and how to also organize those ideas in a paragraph. So standard English in writing uses longer words and phrases. It uses fewer or no contracted words. Words such as can't, want, couldn't, wasn't, aren't. All of those contracted words, we avoid such in standard English writing now, in the actual writing now. So you see now, we are closing the gap. When you learn varieties of English in these modules, ensure that you apply that knowledge in actual writing of assignments in modules where you are required to write those assignments. And these workshops are that meeting point where your assignments meet with the content presented in the modules. But you don't see the gap, you're closing that gap. But there is an application. This then fits into your essays, fits into your paragraphing, fits into your language choices when you write the assignments. We want to see an improvement in terms of your academic texts. So there's fewer contracted words and there's no slang. You will see 1502 students, ENG 1502 students, you would have slang words. You'd actually, in unit 2 of your module, is you are introduced to this variety, the informal variety, which uses slang, which uses colloquial language choices and such examples. And there are other places as such in ENG 2601 students module as well, where such examples are given. So we do not want these words making their way into your assignments. Wanna, gonna, cool, such expressions or words, vocabulary, we do not want to see that in your standard English writing unless you are deliberately making that choice to explain or to make a point. Right. What about non-standard English writing features? You will find that the tone is informal or friendly, very, very informal, very conversational. When I started, I mentioned the conversational tone, where a student is writing as if they are having a conversation with a friend in their living room. Now, understanding the differences between standard and non-standard will help close that gap, hopefully, to realize that I am writing standard English text that uses standard English. Therefore, I cannot use an informal or conversational tone, informal conversational tone, as if we are in a dialogue kind of setup, very, very informal, relaxed, sipping tea or coffee or wine. Mostly standard grammar is used, but there are some variations with regard to non-standard English. There is some incorrect spelling. For example, tonight, good night with an N-I-T-E. Be careful there. SMS language or WhatsApp language, be careful there that such non-standard structures do not make their way into standard English writing, where you are writing your essays, paragraphs. Avoid those. It uses simpler words and phrases. The vocabulary there, simpler words and phrases. Be aware of that. And also it uses lots of contracted words, like non-standard English contractions. You have plenty of those. There's also lots of slang. Okay, so now you see now that standard English writing rather version is the one accepted in university writing. But do we have that example? Do we have the many examples that we can actually use? Yes, we do. Where? In your modules, they will give you those examples. What you need to do is to apply those examples in your assignment writing, even in other modules where you are required to submit essays or paragraphs that should use standard English variety. So we are closing that gap now. Okay. Most importantly, the varieties manifest in vocabulary. I've mentioned that it is made manifest in vocabulary, word choice. It is made manifest, this variety, at a phonological level, right? Distinguishing sound. ENG 1502 students should actually relate to this, because Unit 2 of your module is based on phonemes, is based on phonetics. Okay, so distinguishing sounds or phonemes. Imagine this, not even imagine, it's the reality. Varieties occur at a pronunciation level. I know this is an American standard, or it's an American variety. From just listening to the pronunciation of words. Okay. And I know this is British or South African, and I may even further differentiate locally in South Africa to say that this should be an English speaker, or they are using a variety dominating areas such as where Eastern Cape, because the pronunciation is influenced by the indigenous language elements. In other words, the way I speak is Xhosa language. And I pronounce words in my indigenous language as a way of making way into the way I will speak, or I speak and pronounce words in English. And I can't help it. And therefore, the idea of World English says that this is the English variety that I use and I am comfortable with, and it should be recognized as such. In other words, it is not a second-class English simply because the variety occurs at a phonological level or pronunciation of words. There is mutual understanding of what the speaker says. The difference is how they say it. But what they say, I hear, I understand, and the meaning is conveyed quite clearly. But I am able to detect that this is a variety that is actually mostly used in this particular geographical location. Hope I make sense to the students, because that location has now the language, the local languages or local language has actually influenced the English variety that is used in that region. If that makes sense. And I am able to see or hear the different varieties based on pronunciation of English words. Then there is also a manifestation of these varieties at a morphological level, at word building level. Remember, words are built. Okay, there are words which are used in certain social contexts. They are unique to those contexts, and they are not used outside that context quite often. We'll see some examples as we move. Syntactical differences as well are there, which distinguish the different the varieties of English language. At a syntactical level, we're looking at the sentence structure. You'll see examples shortly, and at a semantic level as well. So the differences in these varieties occurs at those four levels. It occurs at vocabulary, at sound, at word building, at sentence construction, at meaning levels. The variety is a variety, or the varieties are varieties because of the differences in vocabulary or word choice, differences in pronunciation, differences in word building, differences in sentence structure, differences in the meaning they are conveyed. Because they are not exactly the same. But where do they differ? They differ at these levels, either at lexical, phonological, morphological, syntactic, or semantic levels. The difference are located there. And so, but yet we have one language expressed in different ways. One language expressed in different ways, or in the varieties that are used in different settings or geographical locations. The vocabulary in university writing will not be the same as vocabulary in high school or primary school writing. You see that variety? It occurs even at that level. All right. So, phonological distinction or variations between standard and non-standard. Now, this is at the level of pronunciation. As I said, the regional influence on the English spoken in different locations or geographical locations influences how words, therefore, of that variety of English are pronounced. Okay, these are the examples that I have prepared. You see the examples that are given to show the phonological distinction. Now you may ask, how does this help me in academic writing or in academic literacy? In this workshop, preparing me to be a writer of academically sound text. How does this prepare me in that? And I think this closes the gap in terms of me as a student understanding that, oh yes, there are varieties, but I should then tread carefully in my writing to ensure that I make correct or rightful choices or word choices in my writing, so that I do not allow certain standards non-standard English to get into what I am submitting in my assignments. Right. So these are the differences that you may see at a phonological level. I don't want to dwell much on these ones, and also differences at morphological level or word formation level. Let us look at the word equipment. Look at how in the last column, South African Black English or Black South African English, the speakers of Black South African English would say she brought all the equipment. She brought all the equipment she needed for fixing the car. But the South African, the middle column, the South African Standard English, which is the standard English. In other words, official English, accepted, documented, official in the sense that it's a documented one, language which is accepted at university. The word equipments show an error. Why? If you look at the bottom of this slide, you will see there it says that the words equipment and effort are used as both singular and plural forms in standard English, right? So there's equipment for plural and there's equipment for singular in standard English, all right? However, second language speakers, Black South African English, they tend to add the plural morpheme S at the end of the word equipment in an attempt to make it plural, yet it doesn't work that way. The example in South African and British English, rather standard English, we have the singular example. The first sentence is using the singular equipment example. She brought all the equipment. This is plural. She brought all the equipment she needed for fixing the car. So the equipment in the first example is plural. It's all the equipment that is plural. And the next example, the equipment you need for fixing the table is a screwdriver. So that is singular form. But then if you look at the last column, the third column, you will see the South African Black English says she brought all the equipment she needed for fixing the car. And this is an error because the speaker then thinks that that word equipment represents plural, yet not. She brought the screwdriver, which is the only equipment needed for fixing the table. And that is correct. Then the other example in terms of at a morphological word formation level, you see British English example is you must put more effort into your work. That is fine. And South African Standard English, you must put more effort into your work. And the South African Black English Standard, what efforts have you made to address the three students' queries? So at a morphological level, you would see words which should be singular are confused by adding the morpheme S at the end to make them plural, what they should stay as equipment or effort in their plural form, right? So those are some of the areas of consideration when we do our writing to consider such differences. And the other important one is at a sentence structure level, sentence structure. Now, A sentence consists of a subject, and it also consists of the a subject, verb, and object. Okay, that is the structure. Right, I'm just thinking about something else is fine. Subject, verb, object. Now look at this one. At a structure level, the distinctions at the structure level. You have here the British English, where we say the man I saw was wearing a big hat. South African Standard English, the man I saw was wearing a big hat, which is still fine. And South African Black English, in terms of structure, sentence structure, we really need to be very, very careful when writing our assignments. Pay special attention to the structure of your sentence. Very, very important to revise that part as well, because oftentimes these things do occur. The man who I saw him was wearing a big hat, so avoid those errors. We did all our subjects in English. All our subjects should be all our subjects. I find it difficult to cope up with. There's an error there. It should not be coped up with. It is, I find it difficult to cope with my work. I think there were some of the non-standard at morphological, rather syntactical level that make their way into our formal writing or into our academic writing, and we shouldn't allow those to slip through, right? At a lexical level, here is one typical example where we say, in the standard South African English, I haven't seen you for a while. But in the South African, the last column, the South African Black English would say, you are scarce. Now, that vocabulary is incorrect or incorrectly used. We don't say a person is scarce if we have not seen them for a long time, but we do hear people using this in conversations. And then he told her that he loved her. And then we hear people using this vocabulary proposed to refer to telling someone you love them. He proposed love to them. So sometimes what we hear around us can make its way into what we write. Okay, can make its way into what we write. So use the content of your module to correct those areas when you're writing assignments which are not even related to your module, so that you do not see gaps between your assignments and what you are actually learning in your modules. Bridging that gap so that you are applying these things to make sure that what you're writing is sound. Okay. This is an activity, I think it's taken from 2601, ENG 2601. Yes. Look at this. Below are some examples of Black South African English. This is from ENG 2601. Black South African English. Identify the non-standard features and rewrite each sentence in standard English below each example. So we want standard because all these examples here are non-standard. Okay, so we do not want these non-standard examples to feature in your essays. Okay, drugs, they are dangerous. Yeah, that drugs, they are dangerous.
While Benola is finding herself, sir, I just want to
Yes.
ask a question, right? Is it like in a standard rule that a sentence starts with a subject, or instead with a object? Because sometimes we would be given subjects that starts either with a with a verb, with the adverb, with an adverb. So I just want to know, is it like in a rule, an English rule, to say, well, a subject, a sentence always starts with an object? Thank you.
Good. It's a good question. Thank you very much. No, you see, we have phrases in English. Um, 1502 students are here, and they will learn later in their modules, rather in their module, syntax, sentence structure. And in that unit, the focus is on the what we call, let me just start this way. You see, we learn English language at a structure level in some modules. And I think 1502 does that very, very, very well. They do this in English 1502, UNG 1502. They learn language from first the sound of the letters used in the English language, where all the phonemes. And then once they have established a firm foundation on how the English language letters sound, they then move to the phonology of the language. I'm just giving you this just for you to get to your to answer your question. They get to the phonology. In other words, the patterning of the sound in a word. What I mean by that, how the letters are patterned in a word, or how the phonemes are patterned in a word. Then in
Sir,
that, yes,
are you done? Oh, I now understand the question. I didn't read it properly because I'm seeing the time. The class started around 6, so I thought we had 2 hours. So the question, it says, identify non-standard features and rewrite each sentence in standard English below each example. I can simply say, the sentence is written, drugs, they are dangerous. The non-standard feature, we can remove they, and then you can simply say, drugs are dangerous. Am I correct or am I incorrect? You can correct me if I didn't say it properly.
no, you are correct. You are. Drugs are
Thank you.
dangerous is the
Yeah, so the
the correct
non-standard,
standard.
we can remove they because it doesn't belong there.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, you are
Yeah.
quite right. Yeah. Just to
Okay.
uh, um, get back to
So,
responding to the gentleman's question before I wrap, let me just wrap up by saying you are allowed to move the phrases in a sentence to different places in the sentence. In other words, you could start a sentence with a verb phrase or a noun phrase or a prepositional phrase. It depends on
Mhm.
what you want to foreground and what you want to background in your sentence. Just to respond to the gentleman's question as to whether the simple SVO structure applies across the board. No, it is the basic structure where we learn the basic, but then as we learn more in terms of the structure of the sentence, we then learn that we can actually move the different the different phrases that form a sentence. We can move them around in a sentence, you know, or a phrase in the subject position can be moved into the object position, depending on what emphasis I want to make in that sentence. I don't know if the gentleman's question has been addressed. In other words, we are not are locked into the SVO structure when we write assignments or essays. We move the phrases around in a sentence.
So I wanted to ask something regarding this question here. He said the one that he said, my father, he works very hard. I wanted to ask if I'm correct to say in a standard way that my father works very hard by removing the word he.
Yes, you are correct. You could
Okay.
say my father works very hard or he works very hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other one say I want to ask here. The one here, it says the teacher gives too much homework. So I want to ask if I'm correct by saying that the teacher give us, by removing the word too much, give us too much homework.
Yes, too much, not homeworks, but homework.
Or homework.
Yes.
Okay. The last one I wanted to ask it is here, the one he said that he no longer has a peace of mind. I want to ask if I'm correct by saying that he no longer
I would say have, not has.
he no longer have a peace of mind.
No, he no longer has peace of mind. You remove the "e."
Or you remove the indefinite article.
Yeah, he no longer has peace of mind. You remove the "e."
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir,
Yes.
hi. It's the way he's saying, like you can even on this one, she was very much suspicious. You can simply say she was she was suspicious. You can remove very and was. You can just put it in a simple term. Am I still
Yes.
correct? Yes.
Yes.
That's how you
Yes.
can do it.
But so
Yeah.
tell me, even if you say like she was very much suspicious, instead of saying she was very much suspicious, I think you are trying to, that sentence is actually trying to emphasize on the level of
Yes.
suspicion. So it wouldn't it be easy to
Yes.
say she was very suspicious?
Correct.
You
You
know
are
that.
correct.
Oh,
She was very
let me
suspicious. Remove the
let
much.
me just. Yes, yeah, we can remove the much, but this time around, the activity it said we must remove non-standard features. Hence, my answer was she was suspicious. We have two options. Either mine can be correct and yours can be also correct.
Okay.
Or am
The
I wrong?
correct one. His is correct.
Hmm.
His.
Oh, okay. Oh,
His
so
is
I was
correct.
supposed to say she was very much suspicious. Or I must.
No.
Which one should I? Which word must I remove here?
She was very
Much.
suspicious.
Remove
Oh,
much.
yes, yes.
Yes, she was very
Yes,
suspicious.
yes.
Because remember, because
Yeah.
now, sir,
So
I
sorry, I
understand.
made a mistake.
Now, I'm getting a glimpse, and I understand now sentence constructions, right? By looking at this very same sentence, right? I'm looking at what the sentence is trying to imply and at which level the sentence is trying to imply it. Like, for instance, like the sentence says, she was very much, right? Now that
Yes.
speaks
Oh,
of the level of suspicion. So therefore, you can say she was very suspicious. But the word much, it would the word much, if I
it
look at
doesn't
it, it
belong
reminds
there.
me, yes, it reminds me like you would thank someone and say thank you very much, so it would
Yes,
make
yes,
more
yes,
sense like in an expression or something.
Right.
yes,
So it's
yes.
non-standard. Yes.
Okay.
It's
Okay, okay.
non-standard. Yeah.
And
So you're quite
then,
right. Removing much, you are quite right. It should be removed. It doesn't belong there. And some they use it for emphasis, because much and in fact they use it to emphasize the degree of the suspicion in this instance. They're trying to emphasize the degree, but very on its own already emphasizes the degree of the suspicion. high level of suspicion, very suspicious. So it suffices to just say she was very suspicious. Moving much there would make perfect sense. But thank you for the engagements. We're not done. What is important is this. We want these examples to be evident in your essays. The standard version should be evident in your. Now, it's important to check when you do your revision of written work. Check if you are applying the standard variety or you have non-standard features which should be removed. Thus, editing and revising becomes very, very important before you submit your assignments so that you avoid such mistakes, because certain expressions or certain sentences can change the meaning of your intended ideas that you want to convey to address the topic or address the question that you are actually working on. But thinking these things through and also verifying the correctness of the choice that you have made is very, very important. I don't want us to divorce or separate these small, perhaps seemingly even insignificant in terms of the actual essay writing features that we are learning in these modules from the bigger picture of academic writing, from the bigger picture of writing a research project, because it should fit into that. Yes, you learn the different features of language, especially with ENG 1502, and how it builds up to a discourse. You're learning those processes, and also how it also builds up to discourse in ENG 2601. You're learning those. However, not in isolation from the application in research writing. Because when I say research writing, you are at university, you are a researcher, you are here generating ideas, right? You're absorbing ideas in order to prepare you to generate ideas. And as you generate ideas, drawing on the ideas that are out there, you are becoming more of a researcher who contributes to the different schools of thoughts to say, this is the contribution through my research on this area of specialization. And to do that, you'll be using the standard variety of English, be it British or South African, to do it correctly. So this must lead to that point, and that's where the workshops, ACALIT workshop, come in, so that then you are able to break the disconnect between research writing and what you are actually doing in the module itself. So let me end by saying thank you very much for your participation. It is our first workshop. Tomorrow we will meet again. Please check the meeting time. And we will do a few more other things on language and language varieties. We'll still get back to that topic. There are many more topics that we will have to work on as we get to close the gap between research writing or academic writing and our actual content in the modules that we've registered for. Thank you very much.